Welcome to another episode of the Indusdace SaaSTrana podcast. Today we have with us Srikanth Rajagopalan. Srikanth is the CEO at Perfios Account Aggregation Services. Srikanth is also the co-chair of the Data Privacy Working Committee at FICCI. Today in this podcast, Srikanth throws some light on how businesses has to look at security through the lens of data, on how privacy and data privacy and application security is important, not just for providing the differentiation and earning the trust of customers, but with the new Privacy Act coming in place, it is important they pay attention to it for their very survival. All right, welcome to the SaaSTrana podcast, Srikanth. Pleasure to have you here.
Pleasure to meet with you as well, Venkatesh.
Yeah. All right. So, Srikanth, you have had a very interesting journey. I've been following you from selling paints to sodas to plastic cards to getting into fintech startups. So right now you're in a data platform. So soda to data is my moniker about describing you. But anyway, can you tell a little bit about yourself, Srikanth, and so that the audience can know more about you?
Yeah, thanks for that introduction. So yes, yeah, as you said, I mean, I kind of started life as a sales guy. As a sales guy, I found my way through durables to sodas, and then accidentally landed up a job at Amex because I was like, if I can sell soda, I can sell a plastic card, right? It's just another sales job, right? But then that started the love affair with payments, right? Amex was a very unique place. They run what is called a closed loop network, which means they get to see the transaction end to end. And that's got some fascinating data insights, right? From the point of understanding a customer, underwriting her, then giving her a card, tracking her spending behavior, and then mapping it to your merchant coverage. No other card network gives you that kind of visibility. So it was a fantastic 8-year learning experience. I worked with some of the best minds in the industry. Some of them are still mentors, the people that I work with. But then eventually, I got bored of a corporate career. Right? 2 promotions, 3 raises, you know how it works, right? And then you kind of get bored. In 2007, this whole concept of something to do on a mobile, payments, commerce, etc., was just, at its very, very initial stages at that time. The reminder, back then we were in the era of 2.5G networks, right? You had to send a message to your operator to get an internet session. It wasn't ambient like it is today, right? And the smartest phone was a Nokia E51, which was a QWERTY keyboard, right? So back in the day, I found a techie through a mutual introduction, and he says, this whole mobile bandwidth is not being used well. There is a lot of empty space where you can do transactions rather than just voice and SMS. So the idea was simple. Can you install a 64 KB app on a Nokia feature phone and help people transact on that, right? And as audacious as it sounds today in hindsight, we were able to pull off an app. I mean, we called it NG Pay, or next generation pay. I mean, frankly, it was a lack of imagination or any other better word, right? So we were able to aggregate a bunch of merchants, over 50 merchants, who had stuff to sell, right? We started with the usual, your plane tickets and flight tickets and stuff like that, and train tickets. IRCTC was a major merchant on board, right? And then we found in those days, distribution was a big problem. Right? Because you didn't have app stores, you didn't have anybody but a carrier who was a gatekeeper. So we instead went to the merchant and said, you know what, help me distribute this app, and I can help you reduce the distribution costs for your own product. So things started taking off. That hockey stick really started off in about early 2008. We got a term sheet from a very storied Silicon Valley investor. But as it happens, they gave us a valuation on, last year's numbers, but not the current run rate. So typical founder, swagger, you say, hey, you know what? I'm going to end up 3x the number that you're going to give me. So challenge accepted. They said, okay, come back to me in 6 months, show me that you meet these numbers, and that valuation is yours. So from conservative, we went full ballistic in terms of marketing spend and all that kind of stuff. I still remember names like AdMob and a whole bunch of other, Jurassic tools that we used to get going. With the result that we were kind of going to run out of money by December. And by September, Lehman crisis hit. And any VC worth their money who was like, kind of following up with us, the joke became that they were calling us, "Yahan pe koi naukri hai kya bata?" But lesson learned. But the reason I dived a little deeper on this one is this was a kind of a, pivot moment, which said that, we've been fooling ourselves with little green pieces of plastic and black boxes at a merchant counter. Mobile is the way to go if you really want to transact. If you really want to scale any digital product or service in this country with its, complexities, it has to be mobile first.
Way ahead of your times. Way ahead of your times at that time. In hindsight,
at that time, it was far ahead of its time. In fact, as an anecdote, Flipkart started 3 months after us. They were 2 blocks away in Koramangala.
Right? Wow.
And as fate would have it, eventually we had to shut down, and we kind of did a fire sale to Flipkart. Right? So this guy, but then moving on. So, all of us had to pack up and leave, and had to find my way back to a corporate career. Fortunately, at that point, we had a good partnership going with Nokia, and they were setting up mobile money. So the story continued, and we set up, with a bunch of us, set up mobile money at that point of time at Nokia. So one thing led to another, and eventually I found my way to Amazon, where they were kind of starting their India journey. And, if you look back, as the great Steve Jobs said, you can connect the dots. I've always been in a startup environment, no matter which company I worked for, right? I joined Amazon when the website was 5 weeks old. We were selling books and CDs. And person number 3.5 on the payments team, that half is still up for debate because one guy joined in the morning and joined at lunch. So those were, again, the early days of, e-commerce payments. Success rates and, the kind of quality of service you would find from banks was just not up to the mark. So we had a big role to play in actually collectively working with financial institutions, card networks, the regulator, in actually improving the customer experience for, people checking out and actually a genuine intent to buy, but being held up by a poor purchase experience. Right? We started with about 85% cash on delivery just because of friction reasons. Right? I think today they're at the opposite, about 10% cash on delivery.
Wow.
That's
mind-blowing numbers. Just mind-blowing numbers.
Journey it's been, right? So along the way, then, UPI came about. I still remember that April 2016 at the Taj in Bangalore. Nandan was a guy who actually, so-called cut the ribbon and did the tech launch. Right? And he kind of, simplified things like only a genius can, right? He says that all that we're doing is that we are federating an ID and authentication, right? The bank continues to do KYC and account management. All that we're doing is to federate ID and authentication. That's it. That's the most frictionful part, but the least value-added part. We're taking that pain away from you. Right? And then look what's happened there. Right. So, so that journey with Amazon continued. AWS set up shop, which is where you and I met when we were trying to sell cloud to financial services institutions. Honestly, we had to start with C for chocolate, L for laddu. What is cloud? But fascinating journey. And, I think our timing is also right, because at the time UPI was beginning to scale, it was putting a lot of load on, IT systems. So, AWS and then other cloud providers, became a kind of a pressure release system for them. So that journey was there till about 2019. But by the time I was in the thick of it, I realized I was like spending 20 days in a plane. Right. Sometimes waking up in a hotel and looking at the hotel directory to figure out which country or which city I'm in. And that wasn't working. So then I kind of, decided to gear down a bit. And said that, fortunately, at that time, I got introduced to Govi, who's the founder of Perfios, through a mutual connect. At that time, Perfios was about a tenth of our size today. We were looking at exactly like you said before we started, going from a 0 to 1 to a 1 to 100 company. Right? The skills and the talent and everything that we needed were very different from what a founder could bring to the table. Right? So that journey started off in 2019. And very quickly along the way, we found that this whole account aggregation piece, if we did it well, if we strategized well, could be a orbit change scale mechanism for our business. Right? And I think we'll come to that when we talk about Perfios and what we do. So, you're asking a sales guy to talk. So at the risk of talking a lot, right?
No, it's a fascinating journey, and there's a logic and there is a progression and a reason behind what happened in the next step, right? So it's a very fascinating journey. Yeah.
Go ahead. Journey. I think so where we are today, and probably segue into maybe the next question that you wanted to ask, which is about tell me about Perfios and stuff like that, right? So essentially what we do at Perfios is to automate a lot of the rules-based processing for financial institutions. That could be onboarding, could be analytics, could be post-sanction, monitoring, anything which can be defined by a set of rules, which needs data to be extracted from various sources, cleaned up, annotated, and then put into that so-called logic engine. That's what we do, the end-to-end, right?
Okay.
When we started off, we had to really build those proprietary pipes into a lot of these banks, right? So for you to get your data from any bank or a mutual fund or insurance company, we had to build those proprietary data pipes, right? And even today, the number one limiting factor to any of us or any of our competitors' growth is the friction that people face in fetching their data. Right? If you're a totally organized person and you've downloaded 6 months of your bank statements as a PDF, and you remember the passwords, and you try and upload it onto a Bajaj Finance site, you see where I'm going with this, right?
Yeah.
So in that happy case, we kind of, get some, we make some revenues as Perfios in terms of automating some of these sites. Right? So this whole account aggregation piece, though still a little nascent, is meant to solve exactly that problem. I mean, if you remember simply just one thing about what is AA, what is account aggregation, we have the potential to do to data what UPI did to money.
Wow. That's a very ambitious, it's a very simplistic way of explaining it, but data has got a lot more complexity, nuances, shapes and forms, and workflows associated with it than money. Money is by two parties, two banks, and a transfer happens. Whereas
and
with data,
one SKU with one sign here and one sign there, the opposite sign. Yeah. That's it. Right?
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, data is a whole new ball game.
But as a concept, it's a very ambitious goal to have. It's quite amazing. Yeah.
It's absolutely. And the way, again, Nandan puts it is that, it's time that data principals were able to monetize their own data rather than the data platforms.
Wow. Deep.
Very deep. Very deep.
Yeah. So amazing. So that's how Perfios was born. Tell me a little bit more about how this grand vision translated into some sort of a reality. Where are you today, right now? And I just now saw your campaign, Perfiosness, a new campaign that you guys launched. So tell me, what does Perfiosness means? What does this term, being what UPI was to money, that Perfios is going to be data? Where do you stand today in that journey? And can you give me a few use cases where you are actually making life easier? Starting with a disorganized person not having those 6 months of bank statements with me. How do you make life easy for such people?
Okay, let me answer that on two levels. Just for context, we're actually two different organizations. Perfios, the mothership, is the B2B SaaS platform, which essentially counts about 800 odd financial institutions in India and 20 other countries as its clients, right? So our core product offering is analytics, decision automation, so on and so forth, and process automation, using our secret sauce of being able to extract, annotate, categorize, and work with data, right? So our core competence is being able to deal with data. The way we put that to use is to help financial institutions automate most rules-based decisioning. Right? The entity that I run officially is a regulated entity. We have a license from the Reserve Bank of India to be what is called an account aggregator. Right? In simple terms, an account aggregator really has four parties in this whole ecosystem. The first and the most important person is the data principal, people like you and I, who happen to have an account at, let's say, SBI. And maybe you're checking out at an Amazon website and you have a loan offer or an EMI offer from, let's pick a name, Bajaj Finance, right? Bajaj says, fine, I can help you finance this 50-inch TV, just give me 6 months of your bank statement. Today, that's where trouble starts. Right? What we're able to do is help Bajaj connect directly through people like us. Anumati is our brand name. Anumati is the account aggregator that I run. Through us, they can go straight to an SBI saying, here is Venkatesh's mobile number. Do you recognize this mobile number? Do you have a bank account linked to this mobile number? If yes, please give me 6 months of data. Right? So it's a set of protocols, it's a set of APIs that is standardized across. Today we serve. So the first entity was you. You're shopping for a loan. You want to fetch your bank statements. SBI here is the financial information provider, right? Or the FIP. You have your data there, and on demand they're supposed to share your data because ultimately it's your data. Right? Bajaj is the financial information user, or the FIU. They're the guys who need your data in order to give you some product or service. Right? Conceptually fairly simple. There is a giver of data, there is a user of data, and there is a mediator called an account aggregator, which makes sure that all the permissions and all the security protocols are appropriately deployed. Right? So today, the network we have is 46 FIPs, right? Which is banks and some insurance
FIP
companies.
is financial institution provider, right?
Financial information providers.
Information provider. Okay.
So there are some 46 FIPs currently live. There are about 200 FIUs. Remember, a Bajaj who's seeking your data, a financial information user, right? About 200 odd of them who are actively experimenting with AA as a service. We're not the only account aggregator. I mean, there are some 14 of us in the market. So it is fairly competitive. It is quite, interesting, to put it mildly, in terms of how we compete, right? So that's where we are. So look at an account aggregator as a consent manager who is responsible and accountable to the data principal, acts on their behalf and says, okay, Venkatesh wanted his 6 months of bank statement from SBI to be shared with Bajaj. And here is 2 or 3 buttons you need to press, a couple of OTPs come, and your data goes securely between the two systems without any man in the middle, right? And you can start seeing the benefits of that from a security, authenticity, real-time point of view, right? I mean, compared to what is today's best case alternative if you're not a savvy customer, right? You call somebody home, arcade statement like it.
And then it takes its own sweet, it takes its own sweet time, not in minutes, certainly,
And you're in Bombay, right?
Yeah, I'm in Bangalore. I live in Bangalore. Yeah.
If you go to Bombay, there is a place called Chandivali, which is the hub of all this paper processing by banks. Right? I've had Bhelpuri on somebody's bank statement. A printout of somebody's bank statement. It's bloody scary. I can't tell you how scary it is. Right?
Yeah. So Chandivali sounds like pretty similar to Ulhasnagar. Ulhasnagar is also famous for these kind of things.
For these kind of things. I mean, at least Chandivali has got its legitimacy because it's got the BPOs, it's got the processing centers.
Yeah.
But you see the potential of things that we don't know is happening with your data in terms of leakages, misuse, reuse, and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
You don't even know what kind of leakages are happening from a security or a permissions or a privacy point of view, and that's what we're trying to solve.
Yeah. Fantastic. I think it also ties back to the vision you stated that Nandan had, which is allow data to be monetized on its own as opposed to some independent data platform providers providing monetization. And that's what, to some extent, Anumati as a platform and Perfios account aggregation enables it. So
Absolutely
that
right.
Eliminate the middleman, eliminate any kind of independent data platform providers who are going to charge you money for doing the obvious, but just at the point of use cases, at the point of need. In this case, the example you gave was a loan approval. Whatever was for a transaction and EMI, converting a purchase into an EMI, whatever data collection needs to happens quickly between the consumer, the user, and the FIP and FIUs here, right?
Absolutely.
That happens automatically. And it's a pretty lofty goal. I'm very glad to hear that you have specific use cases where it is actually in action, translating that idea into real use cases and seeing some benefits. The thing that really caught my attention, which made me feel good, was you emphasized the word securely, right? The entire thing has to happen securely. And central to this entire security is data. I mean, the moment you're dealing with data, security is going to take an elevated importance, right?
Absolutely.
And in fact, every aspect of security has to be looked at from the eyes of data, specifically customer data. And you being a data company, data aggregation company, it's going to have, in fact, I would probably go ahead and say you're probably a security company as much as any other cybersecurity firm.
Very well
because
said.
You're dealing with data.
Very well said.
Yeah. So I'm just going to go into the I saw your LinkedIn profile, and since we're talking about data, you are also the co-chair at FICCI, right? Where part of the data protection. So can you give me some bullet points on the Data Privacy Act that has come out in 2023, a long-awaited Data Privacy Act that has come out? What do you think? What are some of the key highlights? From your eyes, and you've been part of the committee as well, so you can probably throw in a lot more insights and break it down for a layman.
That's what it means. So that's a great segue, Venkatesh, into what is currently, front and center in everybody's attention, and what is going to really, really shape the course of the data economy in India. This bill has been in the works for the last 3 years, starting with the Sri Krishna Committee report. It's been through a bunch of changes. Somewhere along the way, the scope got changed, saying that we should also cover non-personal data. But a lot of industry feedback, and to the government's credit, they've been very open to engaging with people like us from a FICCI and other such institutions. Finally, the directional decision that the MeitY is the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. That's the arm of the government which has really put this together. What the MeitY finally decided directionally after a lot of feedback was we shall simplify. We will keep it very, very specific to a single purpose called privacy and data protection, and not muddle it with too much scope and too much of bells and whistles. So from a intent perspective, their goal is very, very clear that we need a law which ensures adequate protection for citizens' data with little to no disruption in day-to-day business operations, but a very, very clear paradigm shift in terms of how data is handled and processed by people who are in, as you call it, the data business, right? There is obviously a huge $1 trillion economy, digital economy goal that the government is consistently being pursuing. So we see this as an enabler. A safe, protected data ecosystem is necessary. I mean, you have to feel secure, you have to feel safe that your data is not being misused if you have to participate in the data economy, right? The other few things that directionally that they have chosen to go down the path. One is saying that this law applies only to digital data. If the data is in a paper form, it's out of scope. Right? However, if that paper gets scanned and digitized, it's now within the ambit. Right? Right? And you can see the intent over here that if a person, if an average Joe wants to be assured that his rights are protected, you trade off security for transparency. Right? You participate in the formal economy, right? Whereas hitherto you were data dark for whatever reasons, right? You make the trade-off by saying, okay, I will open up my data, I will digitize it in some form or manner, in exchange for better services, faster, secure processing, and the might of the law being behind you. That's the first, most important trade-off that data principles start making, right? Instead of keeping stuff under your pillow, now in some digital database, automatically the government has got your back. The law has got your back. The flip side to that is a lot of data fiduciaries, right? Will need to go a mindset change, and this is the hard part, right? Till now, there's been this greed for getting as much data as you can, whether or not you need it. Dekha jayega, right? Mil raha hai data, you're getting data, just grab it with both hands, stuff it in some warehouse. We'll figure out what to do with the data. That behavior will need to change. I think the guiding principle is going to be data minimization and purpose limitation. Right? If you don't need to know what car I drive in order to give me a EMI, then don't ask me, right?
Makes sense.
So
I connected back to this Netflix series that came. I think it was called Inconvenient Truth. I think Inconvenient Truth, I forgot the name. There was a Netflix series around the social economy, Facebook.
Social network.
Around the entire. And then somebody out there mentioned that exactly the point you mentioned, that there has to be a responsibility of people who are collecting data. And one way to make sure that the responsible behavior is enforced is the idea was to have something called as a data tax. A tax for every byte of data that you have for the citizens or the users. So it's a very interesting thought process. Here you're not talking about taxation, but you're talking about, in principle, the data fiduciary should show some responsibility in terms of the data, the purpose for which they collect, right? So it seems like a conceptually a step in the right direction, and the law is behind you, probably in this case through some sort of penalties or something. Continue your line of thought. Sorry to interrupt, but
no problem at all. I mean, this is a conversation, Venkatesh, not a monologue, hopefully. Right? See, there are a few nuances that it is important to keep in mind when you're running a data business. Right? You have to first ask yourself, are you a data fiduciary? Which means the person who makes the decisions of what data is collected, why it is collected, how it will be processed and retained. If you're making those decisions, you're the fiduciary. However, if you're a payment gateway who simply just processes the transaction, for example, then you're a processor. You don't get to make the decisions of what data needs to be collected, so on and so forth. Right? So in our context, from what I told you about what Perfios does, we essentially carry out processing instructions on behalf of, let's say, an SBI or an HDFC bank. Right? The relationship is very clear, and we've been in fairly intense conversations internally and with our clients to figure out, how we should reorient ourselves to this new law. One thing is clear that these financial institutions, for the right reasons, continue to be the data fiduciaries. People like us, people like, let's say, maybe a Razorpay, so on and so forth, until they get licensed, continue to be your processors.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And
it makes sense. I mean, so you are the data processors and the endpoints will be the fiduciaries.
correct.
And is it fair to say that this Privacy Act is applicable more to the fiduciaries in terms of their handling of data than to the processors, or it goes both ways?
No, its scope is limited to fiduciaries.
Okay.
And almost every fiduciary is covered by, let's say, in the banking industry, there is something called an IT outsourcing guidelines, right?
Okay.
So it is the fiduciary's job to make sure that any processor or third party that they use to handle processing or whatever of data, there is adequate supervision, audit trails, so on and so forth, and no data commingling, all the things that things that go through the audit part. So the regulators and the policymakers are very clear that, listen, we don't have the capacity to supervise and monitor hundreds of thousands of entities or lakhs of entities, right? We will catch the fiduciaries whose business depends on this data, make sure that they kind of, behave responsibly.
Okay. Makes sense. So there is a 50 crore fine that I keep hearing about, 50 crores to can you explain when will that fine kick in, or businesses? I mean, any businesses which is a data fiduciary. In fact, I would even extend it to SaaS companies. All the SaaS companies are getting the trust of their customer for some service they are offering, and in return, they are storing some data, CRM systems, or any software service company has some form of customer data. Does this extend to any data fiduciary, not restricted just to financial institution? And what will any businesses, a SaaS business, will have to worry about in the context of this act? Is there something for them to worry about, or only financial institutions now?
No, it's any business that deals with PII.
Okay.
Right, and that scope is as wide as that. I mean, yes, the how you answer the question, are you a fiduciary or a processor, will be very contextual to that industry. I just gave you an example from the industry that I know, but I'm sure there are tons of such examples in any other industry, healthcare, telecom, insurance, whatever you talk about. Right?
Yeah.
So the scope is not limited to just the financial service industry. If you're any business, whether you're a software business, you could be even a distribution business, whatever business you're in. If you're handling customer data, if you're handling a PII, you could be an entertainment platform, OTT platform, right? You could be storing user credentials. You're a fiduciary, right?
Yeah.
And to your point, should they worry about? Absolutely, it's a life and death kind of a thing, right? So 50 crore is a big number, boss, for a lot of us. For, I don't know, 80% of the businesses in their respective industries, 50 crore is a big number.
Just get shut down. A startup can get shut down. Yeah.
It's an extinction kind of scale of event, right?
Yeah.
To be fair, I think there was a lot of noise and hue and cry from the industry on boss. I mean, what are we saying? 50 crore, 250 crore and all the stuff. So the minister was very candid in how he responded. He said that this is exactly the reaction that we want from businesses. To be aware that out of let's say carelessness or even malintent, if you happen to lose customer data and break the law, there is a life-ending event that can happen. Right. So
take this very and if you do the right things, then you don't have to worry about it. I mean, if you are doing the right things and you have the right process in place, and in spite of that, let's say something happens, would there be or is it just a black and white that if there's a data leakage, you had to be 50 crore fine, or you had a data leakage or some personal identifiable information gets breached, but they are still doing the right things? That's where the concern is, right? I'm still a responsible business, try to do all the right things in place, and yet API get leaked. So what is it from a process standpoint or something? Is there something that there is clarity, or we will have to go through an iteration to make that up?
Good question. I think it's still work in progress. What we have is just the umbrella law. Right?
Okay.
The umbrella law is designed for three things. One is its universality of application.
Okay.
Right. Two, its simplicity of expression. You should go through the Act. It's one of the simplest English, documents that I've read. Okay. It doesn't have this here so forth and notwithstanding.
English and legal don't go hand in hand, but it's good to have a legal framework with an English-like simplicity.
With an English-like simplicity, right?
Yeah.
And it's intentionally drafted in a way that it can very quickly keep up with changes in technology, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But what they've left to be implemented is the rule. Mm-hmm. We need to draw a line between policy and rules. What we have is a policy. We have the Act. We don't yet have the rules. And that has been left to a yet to be created data protection board. So that's the next level of activity that engagement is now happening between industry and the policymakers, saying, okay, give us feedback in what should be the construct of the board, what should be the skills that the board has. And no surprises, data protection, cybersecurity is a key skill set that board needs. And that board's charter is to be an adjudicator, right? Not in the form and manner of, let's say, a Reserve Bank of India, which is a financial regulator. That's not the scope of that regulator. That board is simply there to say that, okay, this customer made a complaint against this institution that they misused my data, right? And there is a process of inquiry and a final outcome on that, right? Or there could be a self-reporting by an institution, exactly to your point, very well-intentioned, very reputed, got all the right processes, efforts, and systems in place, yet something happened. Right? There is this provision for a voluntary disclosure saying that, oops, this happened. Right?
Okay. Yeah.
So it's hard to predict.
We can probably take some inspirations from PCI as well. PCI did
exactly.
To some extent, there is a process in place. There's a checklist of things to be done. In the example you gave, whether you are a processor or the fiduciary or the user, like the example. In the PCI case, for the technology we provide, we are actually an intermediary. We are not storing the data, but we still are subjected to the audits for each one of our customers because all the intermediaries has to go through the audit. So what we said, we don't want to go through this for each of our customers. We ended up becoming a PCI certified.
PCI compliant organization. Yeah.
PCI compliant organization as well. But there is a process in place and it basically mitigates the risk. I think that level of clarity is yet to be, is work in progress. It's just that there is an umbrella law which says there is up to 50 crores of fine. Or is it 50 crores to something, or is it up to 50 crores? What is it?
50 crore is the starting point.
Minimum. It's the starting point. So it's more than that, yeah.
It can go up to 250 crore for certain egregious breaches.
Okay.
And for an organization, it is capped at a 500 crore number. So it's something really serious and egregious, and it's demonstrable that there was a lot of unfixed loopholes, or sometimes even willful ignorance or processing beyond the scope of the law, right?
So in a nutshell, you are, the analogy I can think of is, and I had this from another podcast I did with a financial institution tech head. He said that any software vendor or SaaS company should think of themselves as a bank. Just like bank thinks of their customers' money, the software vendor should think of themselves as custodians of data, of the customer's data, right? And it comes with a certain, and data is got a monetary aspect to it, a lot more in today's world than in the past, right? So, and this act, to some extent, is a step in the right direction to bring that sense of responsibility across all players. And then eventually
Absolutely.
we will evolve to make it better.
Absolutely. I think you nailed it because, till now there's been always this, smart two-liners that you hear, data is a new oil, so on and so forth, right?
Yeah.
Excuse me. But for the first time, just like there are rules in handling money, we're now going to get rules on how to handle data.
Yeah.
Right. And what happens if you misbehave intentionally or otherwise, and what happens from a monetary perspective. So I think people start drawing those straight lines between how they handle data and something as simple as a P&L.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. Very, very insightful conversation, Srikanth. Really, I learned a lot. I want to give a loaded 2 questions combined into one to you.
Okay.
Of course, account data aggregation, data is going to be central to everything that we do today, right? And I'm also seeing a perfect storm that is happening, at least in India, right? You had UPI, you had companies like Perfios, which is trying to bring very compelling use cases around data aggregation. And I also see things like ONDC, OCEN, Open Networks for Digital Commerce, Open Credit Enablement Network. I mean, fundamentally, these are all standardized protocols for exchanges between individual entities or stakeholders in a specific use case ecosystem to be able to share data and take decisions quickly and benefit the consumers, right?
Right.
You also have a perfect storm that is building up to give productivity boost and speed boost for things like LLMs, co-pilots. The speed between a thought process to something being a viable productized use case is becoming shorter and shorter.
Absolutely.
Because of this open networks, easy exchange of data, and LLM based use cases that can be built on top of that. And then you have co-pilots, which is all these new things that is coming up. It's a perfect storm that is brewing up in terms of the speed at which some unprecedented innovation is going to happen.
Absolutely.
Now it's going to also come with a lot of unknown risks.
Completely.
The speed at which exploits and unknown risks can happen and the use cases is also something that worries us. So I think I'm going to ask you 2 questions. One is it fair to say that central to any kind of business security is applications and the data it deals with, and you take care of the risks and mitigating those risks? You're to a large extent, you are mitigating the risk. And how do you build a culture of mitigating those unknown threats, right? As we go ahead with all this great business use cases that is building up, how do you build a culture of mitigating them? And finally, how do we position and transform this entire threat to not be worried about it, but if you do the right things, it's an enabler for your business. I, as a business owner, how do you take all these things together and give a simple message that, yeah, it enables your business by taking care of security? Right? It's a pretty loaded question. If you want me to repeat that, I can repeat that. There are multiple points in that, but yeah, I want your views on that.
That's very, very insightful and actually a minefield, not from a question answer perspective, but if I were a business owner, there's a minefield that everybody needs to cross.
Yeah.
The answer to your first question is actually the simplest about how do I think about application and data security, right? In the context of running a business. My view to that is a little old-fashioned and very simplistic, that if you can't keep your data secure, you shouldn't be in business.
Yeah.
It's as black and white as that. If you have even an iota of doubt that maybe this application doesn't meet the rigors of whatever security systems that you follow, don't be in that business. Because very quickly you'll find that whatever short-term benefits that you might expect from all this Cambrian explosion of data and capabilities, they will not pay back for an extinction-like event. Right?
Yeah.
If you lose data. Right?
Yeah.
Till now, actually, you could have gotten away with it. Now there is a law which holds you accountable, and there is law enforcement through the data protection board that is coming in. So, yes, there are a lot of businesses today which deal with data which are not up there in terms of security and privacy protocols. I think the simple message to such a businessman or entrepreneur is you should have started worrying yesterday. Today is second best, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Start doing a complete audit and inventory of all your processes and systems that touch data, right from the time that you contact a customer, even going down to querying, where did I get my sales leads database from? What was this, how was it procured, right? Did the customer consent to be in that database, so on and so forth? It's going to be messy and it's going to be hard. There's no going away from that. In order to be prepared to continue to doing business in this new regime, your first starting point is do a complete audit. I mean, where all are my data points coming from? How am I processing it? Who are the different user groups and departments in my company that have access to what kind of data? Do they need a 16-digit card number or just the redacted last four digits? Right?
Yeah.
Right? As fundamental as that, as simple to implement but overlooked, right?
Yeah.
And finally, what is my data storage policy? Right? All of that stuff, right? So I think the first and most immediate call to action would be to start, doing the self-introspection. Obviously, the bigger the business and the bigger the line, number of lines of business, it gets complicated. But there's no going away from it. Right? Two is, as a process of natural selection, you will find that the overall quality of businesses, entrepreneurs, data fiduciaries that survive will be of an order of magnitude higher or better quality, right? In terms of how they handle data. It's going to be Darwinian in the short term.
Yeah. Right? Absolutely. Yeah.
Those who survive will actually be those who will earn customer trust, will start building on top of that, right? Will start enjoying scale benefits, because if 20 of your competitors died by the roadside because, for whatever reason, then obviously your scale economics also pick up. So these are some of the things that, CIOs and I would say even boards need to recognize. Right? Saying that dealing with security and privacy is not just another compliance checkmark. It's a whole new way of resetting a mental model. And looking at it as both threat avoidance, as well as a booster to 2 years down the line.
Yeah. Fantastic. I think the key word I picked up from it, and it's a key word that has resonated in the last few podcasts I did. I did a recent one with the head of product security with HubSpot. Long back, I did a webinar with the country director of India from PayPal. And today I'm doing it with another potentially ambitious, lofty goal of being the UPI for data, which is Perfios, which is already a unicorn. And the key theme that I heard across all those three things on why security should be a business enabler for your apps was trust. Because what is going to happen is your customers will start placing their trust on you if you deal with their data and the applications on which they place their trust on. You demonstrate you're dealing with in a safe, transparent, proactive manner, you will gain their trust, and hence it is an enabler for business. And it's as simple as that. You do it because it's the right thing to do to gain trust.
Absolutely right. I mean, if you pare it down even much more simplistically, ultimately business runs on trust. Right? And this is one form of trust, right? So absolutely. I mean, you said it well. I can't improve on that.
And then of course you have the stick of the law also that is going to force people who are a little bit on the edge to take a short-term approach, will be very careful not to take it, and hence an overall trust and overall ecosystem will build. That was fantastic. I don't think I could have asked for a better person to lay down what this act means, given that you are the co-chair. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Srikanth. Pleasure having you here. Any closing thoughts, Srikanth? Any closing thoughts?
Thank you for having me, Venkatesh. It's been a super interaction with you. Thanks for having me on your podcast. Cheers.